we have to remember, George, that Gary Lineker has been subject to an Israel lobby campaign, as the highest paid employee of the BBC. He was subject to this campaign for several years. Now, that campaign was led by UK Lawyers for Israel, which it has to be remembered when it was originally registered on Companies House in October 2010, it was registered as quote unquote Action for Peace. However, in May 2011, the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs had a post on its site dedicated solely to the creation of the UK Lawyers for Israel. It later on, of course, hosted a 2-day seminar with the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Israeli Embassy in London, and of course, hosted several speakers from the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs. It is essentially an arm of the Israeli government, and the head of this organization, which has militated against Gary Lineker for so many years, Jonathan Turner, actually has gone on record as saying that the blockade of Gaza will actually help decrease obesity and thus increase life expectancy in Gaza. Just so you have an understanding of what type of maniacs we are actually dealing with. UK Lawyers for Israel went as far as bullying an NHS hospital to take, or lobbying an NHS hospital, I should say, to take children from Gaza's artwork out of the hospital. I mean, it's just beyond belief. They've even had a role in editing textbooks in this country on the content that relates to Palestine. But the bigger question, George, as you will well know, is what exactly is happening at the BBC. Now, you have to remember that currently in a key position at the BBC, in charge of, according to the BBC website, upholding and protecting the independence of the BBC, is Robbie Gibb. Now, who is Robbie Gibb? Robbie Gibb is, simultaneous to his job at the BBC, the sole director and owner of Jewish Chronicle Media. Now, the Jewish Chronicle, which was found to be producing stories that seem to come directly from Benjamin Netanyahu's office, is a well-established pro-Israel smear factory, which has smeared yourself, I'm sure, hundreds of times, smeared me tens of times, and pretty much anyone who supports the Palestinian cause has, of course, been written about in derisive tones by the Jewish Chronicle. Now, surely that is a clear conflict of interest for Robbie Gibb to have this role at the BBC, supposedly upholding independence at the same time as being the director and owner of the Jewish Chronicle. But his conflicts of interest actually go farther, George. So on his personal declaration of private interests, Robbie Gibb stated that he currently has a job at Kesk CNC, which is a PR company. So he's employed by this PR company, which was founded by a chairman of the Weizmann Institute in Israel, Gershon Kesk, at the same time as he's employed by the BBC. Surely, being employed by a PR company and a news company, these things would rub up against each other. But what also needs to be stated is that Kesk is a subsidiary of the Publicis Group. Now, the Publicis Group, according to its CEO, has staff that are currently in the Israeli military fighting in Gaza. Again, a massive conflict of interest. Also, Gibb has a paid role at JL Partners, which was founded by James Johnson, a pollster for Theresa May, and Tom Lubbock, a former pollster for the Conservative Party under Boris Johnson. But then you get to the question of the BBC's online Middle East editor, the very individual behind those headlines, which essentially put Palestinian deaths at the hands of Israeli soldiers in the passive voice and work to sort of invisibilize the Israeli bombs that fall on Palestinians. Well, who is that? That is Rafi Berg. Now, Rafi Berg is somebody that collaborated with Israeli intelligence personnel in order to write a book about them, and then was so happy with Benjamin Netanyahu's response that he framed the letter from Benjamin Netanyahu and put it on his wall. And that's right next to a framed picture of himself with the Israeli ambassador to the UK at the time, Mark Regev. This is the person that is editing the headlines regarding Palestine and Gaza in the BBC. But I've also looked into it, George, and found several people who were employed by the BBC after being in the Israeli occupation forces. So, for instance, there's an individual by the name of Roni Belenki. She was a project manager at the BBC after being a commander in the Israeli military. There was even an individual by the name Eli Ovitz, who claimed to be an assistant producer for the BBC at the same time as being a spokesperson for the Israeli military. You also had Bar Ben Youssef, who was somebody that was a BBC scriptwriter after being a soldier in the Israeli military, and someone by the name of Shirona Partem, who was a BBC news producer after being in the Israeli military. And another glaring conflict of interest was Mark Berg, who went from being a BBC editor to then going and being director of BICOM, Israel's largest lobby group in this country. And guess what he did after several years working as director of BICOM? He went back to the BBC and worked on the show Hard Talk, for example, and other key BBC shows. So really what we're talking about here, George, is what happened to Gary Lineker being a symptom of corporation capture. We are seeing clearly that Israel has pro-Israel forces deeply embedded within the BBC, who will be working lock in step with the Israel lobby outside of the BBC to engineer something like what has happened to Gary Lineker.
The British Labour government, which has backed Israel's every move all this time, now trying to persuade us that they think Netanyahu is going too far. Do you believe them?
Well, actually, George, as has been found, there were more arms shipments to Israel carried out by the Labour government than there were by the Conservative government. For starters, we know that Britain has sent the R1 Shadow spy plane on the top of Gaza, even just a few hours after David Lammy's theatrical speech in Parliament yesterday. We know that everyone from Lammy to Keir Starmer have been funded by key Israel lobbyists like Trevor Chin and others. And also on top of this, we know that through Akwatiri, Britain is sharing intelligence with Israel and has been helping it. One of the specialities of the R1 Shadow spy plane is target acquisition. So we have to even wonder, in the cases where British citizens were killed by the Israeli military on the very same day that you had the British spy planes over the top of Gaza, what type of culpability are we talking about here? These people are attempting to legally cover their backs. But also it's worth noting that the UK Foreign Office admitted that at least 80 British nationals were in the Israeli military just a month before October 7th. You've got an individual like Sam Sank, who filmed himself fighting in Gaza between December 2023 and January 2024. This was someone that also met Boris Johnson as an Israeli soldier. You've got other figures like Hani Volker. This is a British citizen who has been there fighting for Israel. Daniel Menza, and even the son of Lord Wolfson, a Conservative peer in the House of Lords. But you have to remember, George, that this is also a structural arrangement. You have an organization like Garant Tazaba, which directly facilitates the journey of people from outside of the Israeli entity into it to join the military, and sometimes even without having citizenship in Israel. So Garant Tazaba has offices in Finchley in this country and is still operating from here. But overall, we've looked into it, George, and we have found around 5 to 6 charities in this country directly materially supporting the Israeli military and its soldiers throughout the genocide. Now, what are those charities? Firstly, there's the UK Friends of the Association for the Wellbeing of Israel's Soldiers. Now, that is headed by the former head of British forces in Iraq and Afghanistan, Richard Kemp. And that organization has literally built swimming pools for Israeli soldiers not far from the torture camp of Sidi Tayman, where you've seen Palestinians by Israeli forces.
Brass Check TV, free to you, not free to us. We've got a server bill, we've got an email software bill, we've got a tech helper bill, and that happens every month. So to everybody that is supporting us financially, that's paying for their subscription in one way or another, we really appreciate it. If you're not, consider doing so. Everybody's got money for the newspaper and the cable bill and all that. Do you have money for media that's actually serving you? That's really the issue here. And when you help us, it allows us to get this information out to the world. So thanks to all our supporters, and if you're not a supporter already, please consider becoming one.